Here we are producing experimental theater in 2025, and really it is an open forum for these wonderful panelists and all of you folks in the audience to discuss the state of the field, unique challenges of this current moment that we are living in, and whatever solutions we might be able to find and talk about as a community as we sort of look onward. So to begin, we'd love to introduce these fabulous friends.
Absolutely. And to our friends on HowlRound,
yes.
all around the world, welcome back also to you. We're joined by two incredible friends of ours, of our company, and members of our indie theatre community here. Melissa Moschito is a director, writer, producer, and the founding artistic director of The Anthropologists, where you have developed numerous works that have played all across New York and beyond, including a project right now that we will come to later. This company is dedicated to the collaborative creation of investigative theatre, which we're also going to talk about later, that inspires action. Fusing research, expressive movement, and rigorous dramaturgy, you folks create dynamic plays rooted in social inquiry. Melissa, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And our other fabulous panelist is India Chanel. She is the project manager at Indie Space, an organization with a mission to provide radically transparent, responsive, and equity-focused funding, real estate programs, professional development, and advocacy to individual artists, theater companies, and indie venues here in New York. Originally from St. Louis, Missouri, she earned her theater degree at Southeast Missouri State University, and her musical theater career skyrocketed, taking her across the country and landing her a spot on season 16 of America's Got Talent. I found this on your website. I hope it's still true. Immersed in the theater industry, India recognized the imbalance in storytelling and representation, sparking her mission for change at an early 2022 founded Blacklight Community, a nonprofit aimed at elevating marginalized storytelling in theater and advocating for underrepresented artists in entertainment. India, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I think a great question to start with, especially considering the work of Steve, who we're here to celebrate, and all the other members of our community, just so we have a baseline, what are we actually talking about when we say experimental theatre? Downtown, independent, indie, especially in New York in our current moment, the legacy and where the field is now, where does that take you in a modern context? What is experimental indie theatre to you?
I think experimental indie theater looks like a deeper connection than, I'd say, I guess, commercial. I think I see it as it being in someone's basement. I see it as the audience being able to do a call and response to what they feel on stage, which is everything for me personally. I see indie theater as, radical. I see it as really painting the face of the community that the theater or that the performance is in as well, which is extremely important because I think that a lot of times people equate New York City to just being Broadway, Midtown, 42nd Street, when in reality, theater is robust in all 5 boroughs. And it really paints a picture of the neighborhood, of the community, and of like the people that they're serving in their neighborhood too. So long-winded way.
No, not at all. Melissa, what about for you?
India, I love that you use the word radical because that really resonated for me.
Yeah.
I view making experimental theater as making theater without a roadmap. You're kind of off-roading. You're responding to for me and for the anthropologists, we're responding to the ensemble. We're responding to the source material that we're building from. For 17 years now, we've been creating work that starts with just a little seed and we don't know exactly what it's going to blossom into. So it's always an experiment. I'm sure we could do lots of like chemical analogies. I won't. But I also just wanted to say I was so thrilled when I got this invitation from the two of you because An Acrobat of the Heart is on my bookshelf, and I revisited it and just saw like all the little notations I made in pencil, and this idea of experimentation and curiosity and reframing the idea of mistakes as discoveries. Going back and reading those words again, I was like, yes, yeah, that's always at the core of what we do. And it's about setting out without knowing all the answers and being okay with that. Being okay with being uncomfortable in the pursuit of an artistic experience.
So both the method and the materials, right? Like it's not just the show itself, it's not just an aesthetic, it's a way of working and a value system around art making and creative labor.
Absolutely.
And I'm also always so curious about how it relates to place, this idea of like downtown indie experimental. I feel like that definition has grown so much. And I love what you said, like it is not just 42nd Street. There is so much happening here in New York all the time. And our expanding view of the where of that is always so interesting to me. I mean, here we are in this beautiful new space that I would say is a, you know, a fabulous downtown independent space, and yet it is so far away from 42nd Street. Here we
Or
are.
even from East 4th Street.
Even from East 4th
The new
Street. Yeah.
downtown.
But very accessible on the L train.
Yes.
Might I add,
You
yes.
weren't paid to say that.
Yeah, absolutely, about expanding the notion of where work can live. And that's probably also the excitement and the consternation of living in New York City, where, you know, now over 20 years of doing this, I think about the venues where we first started making work, and some of them are no longer here, but then you discover something new, and inevitably, like my mind is, what show can I put in that back room with all the couches and the, you know? So always sparking and being like, what could happen here with the people in this neighborhood, right? How is the work going to live differently in this space?
Absolutely.
And not to take us on like a mildly depressing turn, but something that you said there just sort of pulled forward a question that I had specifically for you, India, which is at this time when there is so much uncertainty around funding, especially federal funding, and there are so many spaces that have traditionally fostered new work development that are going away or shifting their priorities. Like, what, if anything, would you, as yourself or also from like the perspective of indie space, say to folks who are starting out or who have been around for ages, like about the path forward or where to begin or where to look in these sort of like crazy times?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'd say right now is the most important time for you to show up. However you need to, and I mean that. Like that is something as small as like going to your local theater and supporting them, going to a local organization and collaborating with them. That's big, but also something as small as, you know, talking to your neighbor. I think that art really thrives in chaos, in my opinion. And so I think that it's important to make sure that you're resting. That for us at Indie Space, we just got out of a big deep breath where we, you know, shut down external programs, but we kept our grants going. So our
The
mental health
core
grants.
stuff was there.
Yeah, exactly. So our funding, we wanted to make sure, especially now, that is readily available. You know, our emergency loans for venues that are having those hard times and they need that bridge to get from one end to another, right? So we make sure that we're available in that way. But we also took a step back to reassess because, like you said, there's a lot of shifts that organizations need to make right now. And that's hard. That's very hard when you have a mission that surrounds everything that people are looking to destroy. And that's why I also mentioned, I'm going all over the place, but that's why I mentioned rest, because it's so important that you're incorporating that, not just within yourself, but within your organization. So back to Indie Space, our deep breath, we were able to really sit and talk about what does it look like to show up for our community while not also going to the soup kitchen, right? Like our organization being in turmoil or being at risk. but still sticking to our values. And that takes a deep breath, that takes rest. So if I had any advice to give, it would be rest. It would be confide in those that are close to you. It would be confide in your neighbors and start from the ground up and just keep going. That's, yeah.
Thank you.
If I can highlight something I think you said so beautifully, India, about this kind of organizational nimbleness, something that we've been talking about a lot, and I'm sure folks that run venues or companies have on their mind. Don't comply in advance. Don't preempt. Things are changing so much every day. I don't know if folks have been following the turmoil with the NEA, but already it's changed like 800 times, and it's really easy to feel overwhelmed. And I think that perhaps that sense of, that we need to be nimble in this moment and to be responsive, which does require rest and recharging. But I think we've seen some peer organizations maybe kind of jump the gun and catastrophize, which also doesn't feel like a good use of our energy.
No, it's not. I mean, I think being agile is also important. I think also going back to, if you have a small venue or a theater company, going to your audience, your community, the people that come every day and connect with them. So whether that's like on Zoom and holding a call, asking people what is it that they need. And like I said, I'm kind of repeating myself, but going to your fellow organizations that are doing the same thing that you're doing and talking to them. What should we be doing? Because I agree. I think people are very quick to make the changes that they need to make to sustain themselves. And it's so easy to go into that lack mindset because things are kind of falling apart a little bit, just a little bit. So, I can imagine, not that I can imagine, I understand the anxiety that comes with it. But I think, at least from Indie Space point of view, where we're turning into is our team and into our community. That's so important.
And Melissa, with the anthropologist, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about investigative theatre and what that means for you folks. But I was curious, if you're comfortable sharing, as nimble, experimental indie theatre makers, what does a budget tapestry look like for an anthropologist show? We talk all the time about the dramaturgy of budgets and the creativity of strategic plans, and that's part of it. So curious, if you could talk a wee bit about your mission and then how you build and piece together an anthropologist budget.
Oh, I love that phrase too, like the tapestry.
Yes.
It gets built over time, and there's like hidden images in it. I also was thinking too, as you were speaking about the power of like placemaking in community, and over the years where we've brought our experimental theater to the social hall at my temple in my neighborhood, because I live in Washington Heights, an area of the city that has a lack of formal performance spaces, and we've turned the social hall with no theatrical lighting whatsoever into a space where we can bring our plays, and that's happened since like 2008. So knowing that you don't have to have a space that is designated as an arts space in order to share your art, and sometimes even the best community connections can happen there. So in terms of the anthropologists and making investigative theater, what we mean by that is we're dedicated to the collaborative creation of making plays that are research-based. So all of our work is rooted in research, source material, historical and cultural archives, and we just believe in the power of using that source material to help us break open once dominant narratives, to find hidden voices and to recontextualize what's happening now so that we can re-envision what the future might look like, which of course feels precarious right now. I've been reflecting a lot with some of the other company members about how even though our work is built over a long period of time, we have a long gestation period, it always seems to come right on time in a strange way. And I'm actually like very proud that our entire history of work is pretty much should be banned by, you know, the list of all the words, all the search terms that are no longer allowed. I'm like, great, because that is our work. It's always been feminist. It's always been about finding suppressed voices and suppressed stories. It's been about environmental justice, social justice, and that's not going to change at all. Now, budget.
How'd you pay for it?
Budget. You know, and another moment of reflection, and I appreciate knowing that Indie Space has taken this pause, and we just got back from a 3-state tour of our newest show, Axes, Herbs, and Satchels, which it looks at the history of Black midwifery in the United States and really 100 years of dismantling that tradition and how that's connected to our current maternal health and maternal mortality crisis, which is a manufactured crisis, to be clear. And this project has required so many different kinds of resources. And in large part, we were able to meet that, frankly, because of our early years of artists showing up and doing the work on a volunteer basis, or for a $50 stipend, or for a $100 stipend. And, you know, thankfully we've moved beyond that, but it took the better part of 17 years to get to the place where we can be compensating our artists equitably for all stages of development of a project. And that is thanks to the many artists who were a part of, you know, at least the first decade of our work. The tapestry of the budget. I would say, like, especially for this show, we've had a number of developmental workshops that did result in performances, and we have committed to a slow process, an intentional process, and that involved a lot of deep care and thought, which again requires a more expansive budget because we needed more time to do those things. It necessitates the slowing down, which is so antithetical to how New York City works, right? Everything's like fast, 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 go, go, go. So it's a balancing act, and you know, we've been fortunate to have successful grant applications that have required a number of pro bono, you know, grant writing hours. And because there's also an investment in an anti-oppressive working environment, an anti-racist working environment, paying for childcare when a collaborator needs that in order to be able to show up fully to do the work. What else can I tell you about the budget?
I mean, I guess my curiosity, just picking up on the tour aspect of it, we, what will the neighbors say, have done a number of small scale tours that were very like localized, as in we are going to this one place to do this one show and then we'll come back. I'm curious, sort of a two-part question, like how do you conceptualize, you said a 3-state tour, how do you conceptualize that? And then is it necessitated by, I want to do this, let me find the funding, or is it the other way around where there's an opportunity and then you sort of make it happen? My final question of this multi-part question is, especially given the, not sensitive nature, but the nature of the work that you do, when you are going on tour to different parts of the country, how do you think about how that work will interact with different folks sort of all over the place?
Absolutely.
So a couple of questions.
Just a few to untangle. Well, you know, this tour was really thanks to 2 different presenters who took the risk to extend an invitation on a show that was not completed. And like we joke in our company that the script comes last. It really, it's true, because we're building the script from using the rehearsal room as the blueprint. We're building from the work that's being generated by the collaborators. And it is done within a framework, a dramaturgical framework, where we're being intentional about what questions we're asking, what is the source material that we're bringing into the room. But I'll say for this project, we were kind of risky in that, or we took risks in that we had our first workshop in spring of 2023. It was a little different for us because we had invited in our first anthropologist in residence, and that was thanks to the American Anthropological Association that funded this fellowship. So it got very meta, because I'm not trained in anthropology formally. And you know, when we named the company, it was like that perfect combination of being a naive and overconfident artist. Like, yeah, we're the anthropologists. But now we have an actual, we're studying people in time and place. Like, this is great. Now we had an actual anthropologist with us, which was amazing, and had a really enriching first workshop and work in process showing. And we got a residency to do the second workshop, which was a huge piece of that foundation of resources to help us do the work. Because space, for those of you who produce in New York, and you know, is incredibly expensive and traditionally takes up a huge part of your budget. When we got that residency, I said, okay, we are putting workshop number 1 over here. There are so many great things in here, but we're putting it here. We're going to start over from scratch with new source material under the same themes, new source material, and we're not allowed to make anything. We have to make all new stuff. It can't be another iteration. Which was a pretty bold decision, and that we had never done before. And it produced a completely different experience, a completely different artistic product. The script came a week before the performances. But by that time, we already had started, even before we went into that residency, we'd already had started conversations with a venue in Florida called Arts Garage and Wabash College in Indiana. But just to understand like where the invitations came in, those invitations, I really believe, came from years of doing scrappy touring, where we're just trying to cover our gas money. Exactly. Where we're driving through an intense snowstorm to get to a little venue, a beautiful little venue in Vermont in February of 2020. We thought that was wild. Or, you know, Mariah, our artistic associate, who performed Artemisia's Intent, our solo show that we toured many different places. We had a lot of experiences of being scrappy, like the venue that didn't have a bathroom and she was 7 months pregnant. You know, the things that you do for theater, and that's what I'm talking about. Like now we are getting the benefits of all of that hard work. So those invitations for touring came before we were. While we were still in development, and came fortunately with resources. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to say yes to those far out of state. It was the first time we had gone on a plane flown somewhere to do a gig versus driving there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great segue. I love hearing, I think another thing for experimental indie theater makers, partnerships, even unexpected partnerships, non-theatrical ones. And I guess, India, I'm curious, when I teach, one of the articles I always assign my students is by Rebecca Novick, please don't start a theater company. Because if you want to make a play, it's not always the best idea to build a whole institution to do it, even though we did exactly that.
We had to test out
how
true was it.
But I guess at Indie Space, are you seeing exciting and dynamic ways that people are partnering spaces? Because that feels like the future to me, is more resource sharing, less siloing, less competitiveness. And a kind of part 2 would be, as we talk about all of these kind of iconic scrappy stories we have, what's the balance in your mind? How do you do scrappiness in an equitable way? When people are not getting paid enough, when people, right, because we make experimental theater, we're not selling $100 tickets.
Yeah.
What does equity look like? Not the union, but the concept.
Right, not the union. I would say, as far as creating work and having those partnerships, or creating partnerships to make the work happen, we see that a lot. As far as like when we're getting people to apply for our grants, when we do our co-working day, which we have once a month, either at Signature Theater or we have it at our own rehearsal space when we have the space, because it's a co-op. So we share it with other organizations.
With Rattlestick here.
Rattlestick here and Soho Think Tank.
Great partnership example.
A great partnership example, yes, thank you. So when we come in and we bring artists to just work, we have a lot of like really, really great conversations with them. And I love, not that I'm not young, but I love the youth. I love like the idea of having your show in your apartment. Like there was one example of, we had two people come in and they were talking about how they could get more funding for this to do it in different spaces and in different non-traditional spaces. And it was kind of like it wasn't like a dinner party. It was like in the house, and it was like this spooky vibe. And but they were walking around the house, so the audience was like following them in the apartment. Let me say, not a house, an apartment. And it was such a really, really cool concept. They had one of the ladies that had the space. She had a partner that had the connections to then move forward into having it in someone else's space. And it's very interesting, because it's like you get the ticket, but we won't tell you the address until later. Like it's very like, I love that. I just love stuff like that. But yeah, we're seeing it. And I think now more than ever, we're getting a lot of those questions of like, okay, so my space right now, we're in jeopardy of them adding commercial things into our space, and we may need to leave. Do you know of any organizations that are looking that have like an office room that we could just crash in, once a week? While we do our work, our rehearsal in this space? Like there's a lot of strategic, agile thinking in that. And we're seeing it a lot more. I will say, Randy and I, we work very close. We have a program called Advisory and Consulting. And that particular program, we bring in people that are looking to either buy a space for the first time, or anyone that's like going through any obstacles or challenges in their space. And I've only been here for a year, so I can't say what has been happening over the years, but hearing it from Randy, there has been a lot of urgency for a massive space to hold these organizations, to hold these theater companies in a more cooperative way. And seeing that, witnessing it, we got our wheels turning. We got things happening and cooking up, which I'm really excited about, which I don't know if I can like really go into detail, but.
Tell us.
Dish, cut the cameras. No, but no, I mean, a lot of it, one thing is our Hell's Kitchen project, where we plan to actually open next year in July. So fingers crossed, we're really excited. And that space is gonna be basically three rehearsal rooms. One rehearsal room that is like big enough to do like something like this, like very intimate type workshop theater vibe. And then we have the two other the two other rehearsal rooms where you can do experimental theater. And then we want to have like in the lobby, like a co-working section. So the hope and the goal is to really push for that co-op model in this space. It's in Hell's Kitchen, so it's smack dab in the heart of commercial theater, but we're gonna do it in a very indie way, which I'm really, really excited about. I feel like I've lost the questions.
That was perfect. And I guess and for Melissa too, but curious for indie makers, for experimental theater makers that aren't paying a living wage in New York yet, or aren't able to offer that to their artist, in our field, what does the kind of value of equity look like when we're not making our living wage on a show?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yes, thank you for that. So I would say the idea and the art of bartering is everything. The art of bartering, I think that is why community is so incredibly important. We, at Indie Space, we do believe in paying everyone, as many people as we can. We do have a grant called the Pay Your People application, and it's, yes, thank you. It's great. You can, basically, it's a $1,000 grant that you can give to a hardworking individual that's a part of your organization or a part of the production that you're running. And we have this big party where it's called the Big Give, and we literally pull the names, the organizations, out of a jar. And it's
transparent.
Yes,
A
very
transparent jar, actually.
very clear,
Double
actually clear.
transparent.
Yes. So we hold those as a representation of what should be radical grant making, or radical funding, being able to allow an artist to fill out an application in between their 5-minute bathroom break at work. You know what I mean? Being able to get the resources that they need. Indie Space is also a great organization that really cultivates the resources and become community organizers so that people can meet each other. I don't think we do that enough. We don't do that enough. And so being able to connect in that way to make it as equitable as possible. I'm trying to think of anything else, but I think that's from the eyes of Indie Space, that's something that we really, really try to encourage.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think transparency is the key word,
Oh my
right?
gosh, yeah.
And something that we've been trying to do, not always successfully, but moving towards it, is having budget transparency, not just among like the staff that are working on, the management and producing side, but also finding ways to share the budget with all of the artists in a way that is legible and makes sense.
And
also,
contextualizes.
yes, an organization that does a phenomenal job at this is Theater and Asylum. They have a really strong practice around sharing their budget with all their collaborators and putting out a tremendous transparency report at the end of the year. We haven't gotten there yet, but it is my goal. But showing people like, okay, this is what we said our priorities were, and here is how we're using the budget. Like our priority is paying artists more than paying for elements for production value. So here's what that looks like. We have X amount of money to support the producing labor. How are we going to allocate that amongst whom and for what types of tasks? And it just provides more accountability for us as an organization, and hopefully draws the curtain back on what it actually takes to make the work. Yes. And starting to track all of the unpaid hours is incredibly important versus just knowing like I keep doing this thing and not getting paid for it, but the only way to make a stronger
choice.
or to make a stronger grant application, or to know like, okay, if I'm going to do this again, are we willing to do that kind of uncompensated labor? Does that feel achievable in service of the work, or being able to hit pause even when it feels scary, because you're like, you got to keep going. This idea of momentum, especially in New York City, you don't want to lose momentum. Like what happens if you hit pause and you're like, okay, what actually was working? What's not working? Where are our resources? If not in the bank account, then like what else is this costing us to do the work? And is it healthy? Is it worthwhile? And it's taken a long time to get to the point of being confident enough to hit the pause button.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you for that. I think that, brought something up for me, something that we've started doing, and whether it's been successful or not, I'm not sure, but on the advice of the great operations and grants managers at Art New York, we've started putting in-kind hours in the in-kind section of our budget notes.
Same. Yep.
Yeah, right?
smart.
I don't, and I was personally really resistant to it at first, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. But then James and I sort of sat down and looked at all of the things that we do, that we are happy to do, that we love to do to continue to keep this company open. And when we tallied up the hours, was well above, sort of what we are compensated for. And just naming that and giving it value even for ourselves, and then looking at all of our other collaborators and what beyond a stipend or beyond a weekly fee they put into work, and numerating that really unlocked something just for me as an artistic director and as a grant writer and as a panelist. Really was transformative, and I'm happy that we started doing that. And that example, as well as sort of what you said about Theater and Asylum and what you said about this apartment show, which I want to know more about, just sort of makes me think, like, what else, whether it's a production or a working model or something, have you seen, I would say particularly since the start of the new year, but especially maybe even over the last year, that has been like exciting, that you've really been jazzed about, to sort of bring us into a looking forward, happier mindset.
One other just thought to close the loop about equity and in compensation and how to produce, and it has to be incremental. You're not going to solve all the budget issues and fill all the gaps completely overnight. I mean, I have a distinct memory of walking into a rehearsal when we had already premiered Artemisia's Intent at the Frigid Festival, and then we were going back into rehearsal to like tweak things based on what we learned from the audience. And I walked in and I gave all the collaborators a crisp $5 bill for their subway ride, and people were so excited. Also,
Because it demonstrates care.
well, yes, and that was really, because we had just like a pathetically small stipend for making that show, that was paid out like way at the end. Now something that we do is we pay collaborators, we try and pay them either every 2 weeks or on like some other schedule, so that people aren't waiting all the way until the end of a project to get paid. But that $5 example is just like, that was in 2000 and, if I can remember correctly, 2019. And we keep going and we keep inching forward, and every time we make a budget, we pay a little bit more. We pay a little bit more. We think about like, what other labor and time are we not compensating? How can we be more holistic? And you do see growth over time. So you can't be afraid to take that first step.
It's like, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Like, do the day-by-day stuff. I think one last other thing on equity that we've experimented with, and our collaborators in the room can speak to this, is sharing IP on the shows we make. Because as experimental theatre makers, it's not a play process where a playwright arrives with a finished script and a director does straight sixes, and everyone is contributing. In good experimental theatre, everyone in the room is contributing, and that's something that costs us nothing. And so saying to collaborators, if someone writes a play, that's different, but if we're in a room devising it, saying to folks, if this ever goes, if our weird little show randomly makes it to Broadway, you will have a stake in it. That feels like another demonstrable way as experimental makers of saying to people, your work is valued. Your question though, Sam, that work,
oh my God, I was so enthralled, I forgot what it was. What has happened? What have you seen, experienced? What is new? Is there anything that you're like really jazzed about or looking forward to right now?
Damn, I feel like we're just so in the thick of it that it's been admittedly difficult to find it unless it's within my neighborhood at times. And a lot of times, even in, I don't know what's happening with my hair, even in my neighborhood, it's the, walking around and finding somebody doing something in a park. For me, that's everything. So even, I think it was So I live on St. Nicholas, like between 129 and 130. Not to put my address out there, but there's this.
We're gonna roll up on your corner.
You're like, hey girl,
I got a show for you.
but there was the park that's like maybe five blocks up. I like to take walks like during my lunch break, and there was this. I don't know if it was a school. I didn't ask any questions because I'm just a bystander. But it was like a poetry show that they were doing on like the concrete like part of the park where you just have the benches and stuff. And they had like the chalk, you know, with the time and all that stuff. For me, that's what I get excited about. I will say because I'm immediately in the thick of it, I haven't come across anything yet. It's early in the year, I will say. But those are the things that really captivate my eyes. Those are the things that really get me excited because I get curious. I do want to know if they're coming back. I do want to know how can I be a part of it. I like poetry. I like writing poetry. And the why too. Like how did you end up here? You know? And actually, I think, was it last year, we had an event called the Murder Room, and I think you both were there.
Yes.
Yeah, you all were there, right?
That's Soho Rep, right?
Yes.
At the old
The
Soho
old
Rep.
Soho.
At the
Rep.
old Soho Rep, yes.
R.I.P.
Wow. That sucks. So yeah, the Murder Room was about, so it was this concept of putting out different articles over the years, different articles, statements, and ideas about theater in New York City. And the premise was that like New York has died. Who killed New York
doing
City's
autopsy.
theater, yes. And you know, how did it die? Like how can we revive it too? And it was just great discussions about how it's so important to make sure that we're using these public spaces like a mall, like a park, to be able to do the work that we want to do. And I think that goes even back to the idea of like equity and being able to be as accessible as possible. I think that also includes taking great use of these public spaces that people just kind of walk around in the first place. Like why are we not activating those spaces with art, you know? I feel like I went on a tangent, but yes, I'm looking forward to the pop-ups. I'm looking forward to my personal neighborhood and seeing what they have going on in art. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Anything from you, Melissa?
Well, it's like a cruel reality of when you're an indie theater artist or any theater artist and you're in the midst of a project
You don't
and
see
you're
theater.
like,
See anything?
you don't, like, when did I, and as a parent of two, that has its own challenges, although that's shifting because now I can like take my kids to shows. My daughter is in a show. She's gonna be in a show at the end of this month, so I'll be an audience member. But actually, my 10-year-old and I, a couple of weekends ago, went to a phenomenal little space in the Bronx called ID Studio. And it's a theater that's in a brownstone. And I believe it's in Mott Haven. I could be wrong. Someone can correct me. My co-director on Axes, Herbs, and Satchels, Sandy Luna, is the executive director there. So I'd been there before for meetings and rehearsals and hadn't yet experienced a show there. And it was magical. We went to go see their production of Arsenio, which is about a musician. And the evening started where we were in the downstairs garden level of the space, and there was a little wine and cheese reception. My son loaded up on cheese doodles. He was very happy. And, you know, we just got to meet people and chat with someone who grew up in the neighborhood and now lives somewhere else, but came back to see the show. Then we all went upstairs into this intimate little black box theater, saw this beautiful performance where we were right up close to the performers. And for me, the best part was like sneaking glances at my son and just seeing how he was so lit up by the performers. And then we got to finish the evening like dancing with the company and then going back down and getting more cheese doodles. And it was great.
All theaters should be like that.
Yeah, and then, you know, maybe I need to link up Sebastian with Indie Space because he's like, we need to buy a brownstone and make it into a theater. He's like, but it can't be any building. It has to have a special feeling. I'm like,
Character,
yeah, okay, let's go.
Someone call us.
Yeah,
We'll
I
work
will.
some out.
But
20-year plan.
Totally, but it just spoke to like the power of a space rooted in community. And that felt really welcoming, that you wanted to go hang out there. And it made me feel like, oh, I wish I had this in my neighborhood, that I could just walk there.
Yeah.
So I love that.
There's something, I mean, thank you both for that. There's something, I think, having lived in New York for a while, made work in New York for a while, sometimes I'm like, well, I know all of the places that this could possibly be happening. And then you walk into a new space that you've never been in before, or someone is doing a show in a non-traditional space. And it is so exciting to see that sort of creative thinking and that next step. And frankly, it's part of what brought James and I here to this very theater, is that this is a brand new space that I read about in the Brooklyn Daily, and the article tagline was something like, if you weren't paying attention this summer, a new theater opened in Brooklyn and you should. And I was like, but I live 15 minutes from here. What are you talking about? And so feel some of that joy in seeing this beautiful space, and I'm so grateful, of course, to the Gracemoon folks for having us. I know that we have just like 10 minutes left. I'm curious if we want to open it up to the audience if there are any questions from you all about any of the things we've been talking about, or like maybe anything that's been on your mind. And if not, we have a couple more in the bank.
Yeah, please.
I have a really random specific question that came to my mind when you were talking about budget and the tapestry. And I'm wondering if either of your companies has ever thought about putting the tapestry, the budget, in the program. To see,
Wow.
like, you know, and like I'm not me, but if I'm somebody who's like, oh, like you might not think that you could really help in this way, but it really, some theater doesn't actually cost that much to someone else's brain. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I could give them $5,000 for that next time or whatever. I just wonder if that's ever come up in your mind.
It hasn't, but I kind of want to steal that idea.
Radical.
I feel like I've seen that
Have you
before.
seen that? Yeah, that's the
I've
other part.
seen that before.
Yeah.
I would love to get to the place where I felt like I was brave enough.
That's the word that came
Or
up.
just even like that feels slightly daunting, but I like a good daunting challenge of like, how do I make that legible? Like, what is it that I could share? Because I'm proud of the work that we've done to resource the shows. I think it's more about like, am I doing it wrong? That's what I worry about. So I just have to get over that, because I think that feeling is always there when we're making the shows. Are we doing this wrong? Maybe, but it feels good, so let's just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, I mean, the saying we like to use a lot is, if you build it, they will come. And so whatever tapestry you're building, you're allowing, and not just towards you, I mean, anybody that have, you know, this idea, which is brilliant, by the way, like, I love it. You allow people to come in to assist. Like you said, like, oh, you know, 5,000, they only needed 5,000 to make that happen. Oh my God, I could do that. I could add that to it. Or, oh, they put money into this. Oh, I have a connection. I love this theater. I have a connection. I know I can get that down to $2,000. Like, it opens up. Yes, no, please. I love this. It allows an abundant amount of opportunities for your community to give back. You know, indie space, we have had trouble asking our community to give, because we give back. We give. Yeah, that's it. But we were kind of talking about in our dream space, like during co-working, what if we had like a little QR code, like donate the $5, donate $10 if you have it. And, you know, we had the conversation of like, well, why are we asking our community, the community that need the $500 mental health grants that we give out? We give out about 20 of those every month. And so we're like, no, that's not right. And we had a conversation with some of the people that were in the co-working space when we were having the conversation. They were like, you're robbing us of the opportunity to be able to give back. I got the Pay Your People grant twice. I don't think that's possible, but twice in a row, like every year, I've gotten it twice. And I can give you $10, Randy. I can give you $10 indie space. Yeah. Don't take that opportunity away from me, because I love this community. I love the community that you've created. So I love that idea. We also are playing around with the idea of like participatory budgeting. So allocating a certain amount of money and asking the community, hey, what do y'all want to do with this? What do y'all want us to do with this $15,000? You know, that's another great example of like transparency and allowing the community to interact. So yeah, I love that.
We have one more question before we move to our last part of the evening.
I saw two hands.
I just want to comment more so off of that. It's really nice.
Microphone.
Oh, okay.
For the people on
Yeah.
line.
Is it on? I can't tell. I just I guess a comment as someone who's very green and like recent graduates. I think the budgeting is the most scary part. And so to go off of what you were saying, I think it's really helpful to see more established companies or spaces having an example of a budget. So then it's like, oh, they can do this with that amount of money. Like I'm doing something with like less money. So like I'm on the right track, or okay, like if I want to make theater, I could do it with $5K. And so, because we see a lot of theater where we're like, I don't know how much this cost. And so it's nice to see work that doesn't cost that much.
I love that because like if you've been doing it for 20 years, you're doing something right. You're doing something that's going to allow someone to learn from you. So I love that. Thank you for that.
Do we have time for the last question?
Yeah.
There's
I saw
I was
one
gonna
more there in
say,
the
raise my
back.
hand in the back.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
John?
So, yes, HowlRound people. I studied with some of these people in this room. And I remember when I was in training, I told someone, it's like, oh, I'm studying experimental theater. And they said to me, and it's always stuck with me, oh, so you're studying something that doesn't exist yet? And so that stayed with me. And then my question is around, like, what keeps you coming back? And when you invite other people into this landscape of ours, it's very difficult to navigate. Why do you feel like that's important? Like, why do you feel that we should keep making experimental theater? You know, sometimes that means being in a room with 99 seats and 10 people, which is very different than like a Broadway house where it's like they're selling that $350 ticket for Othello. And I want to be in that room with those 10 people. For you, what's that about?
That's a really good question.
I would say, like at my core, what keeps me coming back is the incredible sense of possibility that exists in a rehearsal studio. Whether you're in there with professional actors or whether you're in there with a mix of actors and community members, and we're all kind of in there either grappling with a question that we're trying to answer or just with the simple, but I mean, it's not even that simple, but the space to play and invent and collaborate, really open up and be vulnerable enough to do that kind of work. And especially when we're so stuck behind screens or just sort of walled off from each other. Even in New York City, you know, when we first started out Anthros, we hosted jam sessions where we just wanted artists who wanted to practice physical theater to come together in a rehearsal studio and jam. And that level of communication where you don't have to be guarded on the streets of New York City so that no one gets into your personal space, like how can you transition into a place where you're inviting your space to be invaded, you know? That always just seemed to be the point of making. And to extend that to being vulnerable for an audience in a performance so that hopefully you can have a really meaningful conversation with them, even if it doesn't result in words being exchanged, but it's a share of energy, that has to be more powerful than ever to get people to agree to come into a space together for an hour and be present with each other. Like, thank you for coming and listening.
Yeah, right? By the way.
That, yeah, being in community.
I love that. I will say for me, what keeps me coming back is the movement of experimental theater. Like, experimental theater makes what commercial theater is today. It just does. Like, I believe theater is, TV and film is what, 30 years behind, theater is about 50, 60 years behind. But it gets there eventually. And I think that those 4 people that are in that 99 seat theater, they get the opportunity to get a very private and intimate viewpoint on that community, on that narrative. I think it gives something that stands the test of time, which is storytelling. I think that when it comes to history, the winners get to tell the story. And the thing about experimental theater, we get to break that idea. And I know that's more about storytelling, but even in that, in the idea of storytelling is experimental as well. So what keeps me coming back is knowing that we are paving a way, regardless of what the story is being told and where you are. It can be moving enough to carry on in some way, shape, or form, like planting that seed and seeing where it goes. So that's what keeps me coming back, for sure.
Perfect note to end on. Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're going to transition straight into our last kind of capstone event of the day. As everyone in this room and online, I'm sure knows, Steve Wangh needs no introduction. I'm going to give you a brief one anyway. Steve has been a playwright, director, actor, and teacher of acting. He is the author of An Acrobat of the Heart, 25 years anniversary. It's, I'm sure almost everyone, if not everyone in this room, has read and learned from that book. He's the author of 15 plays. I could go on and on. Professor Emeritus at NYU Tisch, longtime teacher at our beloved experimental theatre wing. Steve, thank you for letting us put this celebration on for you and your work today. I hope you feel the love in the room. And to wrap us up, Steve is going to present a part conversation, part reading, part collective exercise that we're all going to do. So for folks on HowlRound, we're going to figure out what that looks like digitally as we go. Thank you again, and Steve, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to just swap.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we get more intimate?
Yeah, let's do it.
Like people in the back moving front and maybe moving, I don't know how the lighting. Like the lighting gets to here, so, or bring chairs around or something.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Hi, do we want to?
yeah, and more, yeah, good light. Yes, thank you.
James, do you have that? I follow you.
Yeah, come sit in the front and whatever. Move some of those chairs. Thank you. Okay. So two prefatory thoughts, one just off that silence. You know, in that second play, the one I performed in, I play a lot with that nothing's happening. I learned that lesson in an ETW classroom many years ago. Some of you probably heard this story before. At that time, Ron Argelander, who was the founder of ETW, was in charge. And one day he said to me, I was teaching class, he said, we have this guy who's come from California, from the Bay Area, and he wants to lead a workshop, so I'm going to let him lead your class, Steve. And so this was experimental theater, right? So sure, why not? So he came into the class, and he asked everybody in the class, this was in Studio 5, everybody in the class to stand around in a circle. And that was it. And, you know, we all, I and the students all were standing in the circle. And after maybe 3 or 4 minutes of standing in the circle, one of the students had the temerity to say, is that it? And this guy from California said, that's good. And when I tell that story, I think about how I've never had that much chutzpah to just to really do nothing. But it is nice to take that pause and let everybody, you know, everybody's imagining what should happen, or why is there applause here, or whatever, and to say, that's something. Things going on. I used to think that a lot in the subways, that the subway was full of all the people in the subway. Now it's different because everybody's on a phone. But at that time, it was just all the people. But then if you looked at their eyes, they were like, and you could see that they had all these things going on in their mind, that the subway was full of the actual people in the subway, and then the clouds of people who were in their heads also. The other little prefatory thing I wanted to say was off of what the little conversation we just had about that thing about the kindness, the generosity of asking people to do something for you, that you think you're supposed to be giving, and how generous it is to ask somebody else to give, because that act of giving is wonderful. And that you're, like somebody said, you're depriving us of the chance to give to you. What is that? And when you think about, I'm now the president of the Vermont Insight Meditation Society, and Buddhism has this whole other take on compensation. You were all talking about compensation. The Buddhist view is that you should not be compensated. You should not, I mean, there's, you know, inside that conversation you were all having, there's this thing about the artist should be compensated equally with whoever you want to list. And there's a Buddhist view which is actually the opposite, that you shouldn't be compensated. You should do what you need to do to survive in the world, and it's a very Western capitalist idea that you should be compensated. And what would it be like if, like Buddhist teachers, you always insisted on teaching for free? That's the thing. And then if people want to give you money, you know, or Buddhist monks go around with a begging bowl, and people want to put a banana in your begging bowl, that's great. But the part of it that's the work, what you're doing, is free. And it would be interesting to think I mean, at this point in my life, I'm no longer officially working. So I wasn't paid for this, and I just did a show in Brattleboro, and I wasn't paid at all. The actors got gas money, it's that version. Anyway, questions about that? Okay. So this that I'm going to say to you and propose that we work on is less about the organizational stuff that you all were just talking about, and more about, so the question you were dealing with before was, in these conditions, these days when we all know what's going on, how do we survive? And what I wanted to talk about and play with you is, in these conditions, with what's going on in that world that we seem to be living in, what kind of art could we possibly be making that speaks to the horror we're living through right now? I don't know how much I'm going to stick to this script. So, it was 1939 when Bertolt Brecht wrote this thing that probably most of you know. In the dark times will there also be singing? Yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. And some of the headlines that one reads nowadays, or the blogs that show up, suggest that, oh, this is 1939, that we're seeing that we're living through a moment like that. Other of the headlines say, no, it's not that, it's just 1929. Mm-hmm. But one way or another, it's pretty dark. This past week, what with the fall of the stock market and the judicial decisions, I started thinking, I'll bet even Donald and Elon start thinking it's getting dark. I don't know, maybe not. But if these are dark times, what kinds of music, what kinds of plays should we be making? If Brecht's right that one must make art about the dark times, what does that about mean with these kinds of dark times? Keeping in mind that art making has at least two constant requirements. One is that it keeps the artists from dying or going crazy, that you're doing it for yourself, to keep yourself alive. I can't stand what's going on, or I'm feeling these feelings, and I need to do this for me. I think all artists feel that. But there's this other side, for most artists at least, that I know, that I also want to do something that has a possibility of having an audience. That's what was so wonderful for me, to finally have an audience for these plays. We once had this violinist came to a summer theater program we were doing, violinist who played really weird music. And he did, after teaching for a couple of days, then he did a concert. And it was pretty weird. And so at the end of the concert, one of the students said, can I ask you a question? What would your reaction have been if some of us had started walking out while you were playing your violin? And he said, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me at all. And he was that kind of artist. He was doing his art, and it didn't matter, or at least he thought it didn't matter. But I've never been the least bit like that. It always mattered, always seemed to matter to me that I'm making something that's for an audience. So keeping that in mind, what do we do? There's this quote, you know, we mostly don't think, when we think about artists who are doing political art, we think of Bertolt Brecht. We don't usually think of Thornton Wilder. But Thornton Wilder, in '57, he published an anthology of his longer plays, and he wrote that the reason that he started writing plays was because he was dissatisfied with the theater that he saw that was 19th century theater, which he said was made to be soothing, and the plays were created to satisfy and pacify audiences who were assured of eternal life in the next world and squarely seated on property and privileges in this one. And he said he started to write theater in order to ask the questions that must not be asked. Questions about the meaning of life, about power, and about what Thornton Wilder called the wide tracts of injustice and stupidity in the world. And I wouldn't have known that reading Our Town, which is my favorite play in the whole world, that was what his motivation was. So he began writing plays, very different from 19th century plays, in order to awaken audiences from that stupor. But these days, the problem is that rather than attempting to soothe us, our culture attempts the opposite. Our culture attempts to pacify us by distracting us. Rather than being lulled to sleep, we're overworked, inundated with input, fascinated with multitasking, so we don't have time to ask the questions that must not be asked. But if that's the case, what are we supposed to do about it? And it was really interesting to hear you talking about pausing or taking several years to make a piece of art, because that's really un-American. Because there's a great temptation to try to be as awake, to try to out-awaken what's already hyper awake. You know, and to make shows that are louder and faster. I remember, what show was it? I don't remember. You know, going to theater that has more special effects and is louder and faster and bigger and, you know, uses technology more and so on. I was struck last week by a thing I read in the Times that made me think about, oh, it's the same thing in theater and in politics. There was an article in the Times about, which was interviews with Democratic operatives who were trying to figure out how to counter Donald Trump. And one of them said, Trump is the most relentless communicator in the history of politics, and he has the biggest platform. So the only way Democrats can begin to compete with this is by communicating constantly everywhere all the time. And I thought, wow, I hope that's not true. Because, you know, my feeling is that when the left tries to be as loud and as angry as the right, we've lost the game before we even started. I mean, we've become the enemy, like Pogo said. But then, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to work with the amount? I've been feeling it a lot. I've been spending most of this year, I've spent more energy most of my energy's been going into organizing around Gaza. I've been to a lot of political events, and the amount of anger that's going on among my friends, I find oppressive. I don't know if you know yes, Ross? Yes, absolutely. I was at a big meeting, a wonderful community meeting last weekend with, 100 people showed up at this meeting from a variety of different organizations, from very pro-Palestinian organizations to people who are more liberal kind of people and people who hadn't been doing political work. And at the beginning, somebody asked, how many people are feeling depressed? How many people are feeling, confused? How many people are feeling angry? On the word angry, almost every hand in the room went up. And I thought, oh, Jesus. Are we as angry as Donald Trump is angry? So I thought about, some of you probably know the Tibetan Buddhist practice of Tonglen. Any of you know Tonglen? Tonglen, you're taught to breathe in the pain and anger that's out there and breathe out love. On every breath, you should take it in, it should metabolize and somehow change inside you and come out in this completely different form. Good luck. How do we do that when the amount of pain and anger that we're taking in is at the level that it is now? How do you do that? And I thought about that as an acting teacher. I've learned that most acting students, many acting students, would come to acting class feeling like, if I go all the way there, that you, Steve, are encouraging me to go, if I really cry those tears, or if I get that angry, that's dangerous. I can't do that. It's too much. I'll drown or I'll hurt somebody. And what I was teaching, the physical Grotowski-ish work that I was teaching, was about finding a container, a physical form, a psychophysical connection through the body that would allow you to feel that much. And that the training was really about that, was about, you can stand it. You, the actor person, can bear that emotion. So for instance, you can fall as hopelessly in love as Romeo and bear it. You could feel as jealous as Leontes and bear it. You could be as angry as Paulina and survive. You could be as violent as Lady Macbeth and come out and be able to do it again tomorrow night. And the acting training was largely helping people find the containers, the forms that allowed them to process a level of emotional energy that they didn't think they could, that they were much stronger than they thought they were, that's what acting training was about. But then I started looking at me, putting aside it's easy for me to do that as an acting teacher, but as a playwright, is there a parallel process? What does it mean to find forms? Yeah, forms that would allow me to process what is coming at me every day from my computer and process it in a healthy way, in a way that leaves me whole and that somehow serves this Tonglen purpose of changing it so that I'm not just spewing the anger back out, but with a leftist tinge to it. In 1940, W.H. Auden wrote a remembrance of W.B. Yeats, who had died a year before, and he wrote this: "Mad Ireland hurt you into poetry. Now Ireland has her madness and her weather still, for poetry makes nothing happen. It survives in the valley of its making, where executives would never want to tamper, flows on south from ranches of isolation and the busy griefs, raw towns that we believe and die in. It survives a way of happening, a mouth." And I feel like today, like Yeats, we are being hurt into poetry, that we feel like we have to work with this hurt that we've got. But how do we do that? And again, you know, I feel like if I don't somehow transform it, I'm no different from what I'm fighting. Later in that same poem, Yeats, about Yeats, Auden says, "With the farming of a verse, make a vineyard of the curse. Sing of human unsuccess in a rapture of distress." So we're living in a vineyard of a curse right now. That's where we're living, I feel. But what's a rapture of distress? What are the containers that we could use to transform what we're feeling? I'm guessing that a lot of you in this room have been thinking about this actually last little while. What do we do with what's going on right now? My friend Jonas sent me a play last week that was his version of trying to deal with what's going on in play form. And a week and a half ago, I tried also. I had this really good idea to write a play. And the play is a play in which this guy from Doge shows up at this playwright's place, and he says, "So from now on, you may not use in your writing L, G, B, T, or Q." And so then the characters on stage, whom I named Biff and Happy, he knew why, but I didn't know why. They try to deal with that they can no longer use those letters. And I'm going to ask our two producers here to read you a little of what happened. I thought this was a really interesting idea, but it led to a conversation that runs like this.
I don't understand what happened.
They're so open. Us from Moose and Outsiders.
You mean we can't say anywhere has ers in it?
Right. Shit. I mean crap. Crap. How the fuck am I supposed to?
Maybe you can I mean, find words hadon. I mean, eyes only 5. So you have when one more.
I have what?
When one more errors.
Oh, yeah.
May you find new ear words so you can avoid dangerous. The dangerous.
Dangerous what? See, here is no other word for airs. Is there another word?
For
Airs. Shapes. You draw on a piece of paper?
phonemes.
Oh, shit.
What?
Oh, shit. Ox feces.
So I thought, I can't do it. It's just, it's a great idea and it doesn't work. It's not the right form. It's not a form. I mean, I felt like it's not a form that actually does what I thought I had to do, which was communicate with an audience. It literally doesn't communicate.
Really?
So as I was struggling with my failure at having written this play, I was also sending out notices about this event to everybody on my computer. I don't know where the rest of them are. And I sent one to this guy who's a theater teacher in South Africa. And he wrote me back and he said, congratulations, Steve. It's wonderful you're doing this. And then he added, thoughts also with you for the sorrowful debacle taking itself out in your continent. To which I responded, do you think South Africa would accept Musk if we sent him back? To which he responded, I went to the same school as him in Pretoria. Think I missed him by 1 year. Fuck. Imagine, I could have been friends with Musk when he was bullied, and today he might have been a poet. And I thought, oh my God, I would never in a million years have thought of that plot. And I realized that thinking of containers for what we're all undergoing now was maybe beyond me. I couldn't have thought of that. And then I thought, oh, there's you. So I am now going to propose that we do something together to deal with this. So could I ask you please to, before I tell you exactly what we're going to do, get into groups of 3 or 4 or 5 people, please.
And feel free to use the different seats around the space.
Go anywhere. Be with people you don't know. Just go be.
And folks on HowlRound, feel free to do this as a solo exercise. Grab a roommate, grab a partner.
3 or 4 or 5 people. Okay? Don't waste time doing this. Just grab some people. Okay. So, you ready?
Grab a space anywhere.
Yeah, go be together.
You guys want to be here?
Here.
All right. So, so you got like 15 minutes or so to work. What you're working on is to come up with ideas. They could be dialogues, they could be images, flash mobs, love stories, actions, rituals, celebrations, demonstrations, installations, uprisings, revolutions, anything. figure that you've got as much budget as you could need, as many actors as you want. You know, none of those things are problems. You're coming up with ideas for containers, like, you know, like that the Grotowski work is a container for an emotion. You're looking for containers for what we are going through now. Something that you could use as some kind of performance, but it could be any kind of performance. And you're going to brainstorm for 15 minutes. You could decide to each do your own. You could decide to make one group thing. You could, at the end of 15 minutes, we're going to share with each other whatever we've come up with. If you've come up with nothing, you could get up and say, we came up with nothing, and that would be fine. But you got 15 minutes to work together to come up with something. The idea is that it's something that allows you to really feel that it uses what we're going through now, this horrible world we're living through, in a creative, generous way. Okay, do it. Thanks.
Anyone needs more pen, paper, let us know what you need. One more pen? More pen?
You guys have siblings? I know you do. I do, but I was just when you said the conversation, just like a way of
process, yeah, digest, you know, that same Buddhist principle of you the trauma visited on you, but, you know, are able to metabolize it and disrupt the cycle. And so, yeah, I'm wondering how might that look? To digest it. To metabolize and transform it.
Yeah. Right.
But I like the my gut the actual work, like the actual right. You know, the like reading things
But also people I feel that people also a lot of anger comes out. Like I feel lonely when I'm connected and seen by people and I don't feel seen. All the discussion about it today is also important. It's important to take our screens live. I don't know the complete proposition, but I think it's something about really just the circle. We are obliged to look into each other.
Yes. What if it is this? Container is an act of like literal circle.
Yeah, like, and it can maybe, I don't know how dangerous that is, but maybe it could be strangers. It could be people talking about their individual experiences during this. Okay.
There's another group's practice, which is for me, the administration is just it was interesting. Steve was saying about the anger, talking about the scars and for people to experience that. There is a lot of anger.
I just watched a movie last night. It's called The Crew. It's about Victoria. It's interesting that you bring that up.
I'm pretty sure I can just be like hanging out listening to the news today because it's going to cause like a spiral. I think that I mean this was a thing also during like the beginning of the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, just the idea of when is it time to take a step back, to take care of yourself, and when is the time to actually take action, but to also not exhaust yourself, to not become, because I mean, my generation, for a very different example, school shootings, I'm like so used to it at this point that like, cause I grew up doing drills, like school shooting drills. We even had one that I think that there were a few shooters on campus.
I just say with like words and the way that collaborative was
share your misery with other people creates, I guess, I mean, there's sharing and there's sharing. Yeah, it's like, yeah. Yeah, to like allow it to be seen and heard perhaps while taking responsibility for what's
but also to even just be like angry, to be like giving it, it's just like, it's
yeah, the idea of like it is considered as like safe space, but also like what kind of this is more like almost like a safe space with another idea is like in yourself, like you create that safe space so that when you are in conversation with someone else, like that emanates off of you. I also think this is like a container could be just like I think so when you're all whatever, you shut the door. Like there's a time and place for everything. There's a time and place for me to make other positions about you. Like obviously is how can I help? How can I make it better? How can I be an active person in this thing? Like how can I be from a position of power, privilege, whatever that I help out? It's also like, okay, like you can leave your guilt at the door. Like, let's focus on something else. Like, that kind of wait, we're all wait, no, I like that. I like that. The universe, the earth is a container, and we actually all have the same container. We don't need to create a container to breathe in pain and breathe out love. It's actually like our gravity is right. It's not such a high thought. I get you. Like, giving up the container. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to give up the container. Yeah. Why not? We like your idea. I want. I did.
How much more time do you want?
I don't feel like much. You want more time?
Oh, we have
What do we have to contain this into a container when we share this?
about 5 minutes, something like that. 5
He did say that was enough.
We don't have to be a cheat.
Seating circle.
I know. I just me and you are the same person.
Well, if we did want to present it by that
Like making a work. And that's not many
How do I put that into words? Like
She needs, this is Suzanne. This is Suzanne. She met Steve in Boston at an anti-Vietnam theater group commune in 1969. Steve's her boo, her man.
all good.
Stop it. All right, back to work. Here you go.
Somehow I landed on everyone doing shows.
1 minute, 1 minute.
That's me, sorry, it's okay.
Sturdy.
2 hours, yeah.
It's like a time capsule. And where were you before? Why did you go to Boston? Suzanne Spillet. Got 5 minutes. Actually, what's gonna be the time? Suzanne, I wanna know something
And started protesting the war. That was what was. You from there? Minnesota. Anyway, protesting the war. Let's see.
I got so many questions.
I'll tell you later. I'm not going to say that. Okay. Okay. If whatever you want to do needs a preface, that's up to you. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to say, who's first?
Yes.
Okay.
Just the title.
We're not saying it.
So you're saying you.
I can wear it.
This is the power plant.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Who's next? Here we go.
I'm a huge fan of the negative. I'm a huge fan of the positive.
Fuck the container.
Yeah, no, I'm fully on board. Fuck the container! What's your hot take?
Woo! I have a list. Durational dance contests, fridge magnets, making a love story from words Trump has tweeted, a dance with a fabric of banned words, box breathing words, a rope that comes out of someone's nose with hearts and loves, and it comes out forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Creating anything is resistance. Creating community on the train, radio dramas on the subway, thought serendipity sessions, and in the vein of mass hysteria, guerrilla laughing.
Got a list of things. So we have it on our cast. Suzanne, Olivia, Justin. So the first thing I wrote down was the Container Store, which is a really fascinating store to have in our world. These container stores are just crazy. They're all containers. But this, so we wrote down, I wrote down everything that I was chatting about with each person, what was coming up. So in this container store, based on Suzanne's, I saw her earlier sitting beside Steve, and she had her arm around him. I said, you guys together? Yeah, we've been together since 1969 when they met in Boston. So at an anti-Vietnam theater group commune. So many stories. So I thought it would be really interesting if it's a container store with the Tupperware that you would see in 1969. However, with the temperaments of 1959. So everything's very, very, very conservative, but yet bursting at the seams, and things are wanting to come out before they burst in 1969. That's just, what you want to see. We got a big budget. And I don't know if I'm Canadian, so we had this show called The Friendly Giant. And it was a person, he's like, well, look up, way up. And it was a children's show. And he would stand, he was an old guy, and he was dressed in medieval garb. And he would just go down and he would, put all the chairs and little things, and he would set this little maquette. So that'd be my job. But all these people are inside the container store. Big budget. I don't know what's going to be inside all these containers, but something keeps beeping up. We have Olivia, who's our front of house, but she's a cashier. Desensitized to school shootings and all that kind of good things. So she's checking out items, and this constantly beep, beep, beep. And at the same time, she's chatting, and different containers keep lighting up. And there's one that just keeps going red, and we don't know what's going to go in. Something's going to explode, and Justin comes in. Justin's from the South. And he had, rural red, and his all his bros are Republican, and he's the one who moved to the big city because he's an artist, and he has that temperament, and he wants, he loves his boys, but at the same time, he can't stay in that, and had he stayed there, he would have been just like them. So he finds himself in the tug of war, and he might end up blowing the whole place up to stay with them. I think that's what we got. We got some intergenerational things happening and some Quakers, but it's a really good. Thanks.
We're gonna just stay here.
The performance already started.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
I'm the microphone holder.
Cool, cool. Confusion.
Confusion.
I don't know, your name's Kenny.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't meet other people. I'm Ross.
Oh, Ross, nice to meet you. I'm Kate.
India, nice to meet you.
Bianca.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Do you want to hold this?
Yes.
We don't know when this ends.
Yeah,
No.
it doesn't, I don't think so. Yeah.
We have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
For example,
Pinatas in subways. And they're shaped like elected officials and you hit them really hard. Or one ride to the other. You go.
I was thinking about a show that's in code, so the audience can come. If you know the code, you'll get the story. If you don't know the code, you'll get another story that's just as pleasant as can be. But if you're paying attention, the code may give you information about how to survive or how to live.
I mentioned existentialism and how to deal with my real world problems by setting them in a different universe and world.
I didn't remember what I said. I said something about language.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking about the code. I'm Italian. I'm studying with English actors, English teacher. And I never felt the language as an obstacle. Because I feel that when there is truth between people and true connection, there is a deeper language that is talking. And actually, it's art, and that's the art. I think that's the main container. It's any kind of art when it's truthful, and there is the will to do it and to arrive to people. And already, this.
Yeah, this is it.
This is it. Yeah.
You want to say something?
Great.
Is that it?
That's us.
Okay, thank you. So, I was always the kind of person who would save the cherry on the Sunday. I know that there were people who ate the cherry first, but even as a kid, I would, I don't know, delayed gratification or maybe masochism, that I always wanted to save the special sweet thing for the end. Suzanne, would you come be my special sweet thing? In 1981, when our son was born, we were living in Chesterfield, Massachusetts, in the country, which made no sense at all. That's when I started commuting from there to teach at NYU. Sugar. Suzanne and I spent that year in this country house writing a play that was based on a book that Suzanne had read about Calamity Jane. And so we made a play, a musical about Calamity Jane, who was a weird, drunken character. And that Suzanne, we opened in Northampton, Massachusetts, and then it toured all over the country and actually went to Edinburgh. I was saying to somebody today, yeah, we once had a performance at the Fringe in Edinburgh. It was a two-person play. We had one person in the audience. But there were other shows that were very successful then. So the play is about Calamity Jane, who was this, and it's a sort of circular play that's about how drunk she got. And it ends up with her singing a song to the audience at the end of her life. And here it goes. What do I do with it? Yeah. My life, wait a minute, I have to take out my hearing aids. My life flows down like a river, flows down from the hills, flows down to the plains. I'm so clear and so wild when I rise in the mountains. I'm a torrent right after spring rain. Oh, some folks hide under a roof when it's raining, and most folks keep out of the sun. I've spent my whole life making friends with the weather. Let me marry the wind when I'm done. Oh, some women marry old men like their fathers. Some women marry young boys. I'd rather get hitched to a Kansas tornado. It don't sweet talk before it destroys. My life flows down like a river, flows down from the hills, flows down to the plains. I'm dirty and deep as that muddy Missouri. And too full of my life to complain. Thank you. Thank you all for being here all day. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our friends on HowlRound. It's been an incredible day. Once again, please for Steve Wangh. Incredible team here at Gracemoon, for Olivia and Justin and the whole folks that made today possible. Please stick around. We have food, wine, seltzer. We're going to move everyone to this part of the space to keep the conversation going. Thank you. Be safe, be well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And to Sam and James. Thank you for asking the question, what will the neighbors?
Thank you. All right. Let's get some music on.
Hey, can cut.